It's gonna be a super short video, but random thought just popped in my head about why capitalism makes absolutely no sense. Specifically, I'm glad you're listening. Thank you, but I'm recorded too, so we got a little bit of audience this time around. It's kind of crazy because it's like student loan debt, right? So this is affecting me personally right now. You need the college education and degree to get the job to pay back the loan. Everyone knows that. I didn't graduate the first time around, you know? I was in it, but it's returning back to college you can't do because you have student loan debt that you can't pay because you didn't get the job at the end of the day. And then re-entry into college is a super difficult process. That's one thing, that's one aspect. You get back into college. You still have not gotten the degree yet. You are still studying for the degree. There's no there might be a forbearance process or something of that nature, but you're still liable for the first loan that you got that you did not get an education for, while you are still assuming expenses for the current degree that you're in process for, and you could get kicked out of your program or have to end your program because you can't afford student loan debt. It's like a revolving door system that ends you back into some form of menial labor or slavery, where you're once again forced to consider getting the college education or working, but it's not a consideration, is it? Maybe when you're younger, you think you're making a real decision between, am I dropping out of school or do I have to? No, like you were faced with a realistic survival situation in which you have to work to live. You got to make money because you live in a capitalistic system, but there's nothing within the capitalistic system that actually, it's like basically from this perspective in which I'm giving you, every possible option that you have without a college degree is basically some form of voluntary slavery. All the jobs suck. All the jobs have terrible working conditions, terrible working hours. And if you would have just gotten the degree, if you would have stayed 1 more year, 2 more years into the program, you probably would have gotten $30,000 to $60,000 or $90,000 more in debt to have a higher quality form of life. It's really kind of odd, because you have people advocating not to get education. You have people advocating that you don't need a college degree. But I'm here to tell you that you definitely fucking need a college degree. If you had a college degree, you could probably do everything you're doing and get paid twice as much on the couch. You could probably do it from home, and you still have to work. You still have a job. You still got responsibilities you got to take care of. But if you literally just had a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, your options are night and day compared to Burger King, fucking Target, Waffle House, the supermarket, fucking the factory, like CD, or you go into CDL or some shit like that. You know, it's like, it's insane. It's insane. You have the illusion of freedom. You have the illusion of choice. You have the illusion of having options. But in reality, you're either a wage slave or you're a debt slave. You're either in a position in which you're working because you have debt that you need to pay off, an insurmountable amount of debt, which is far more than you make within years. But the promise, like a casino, like you're gambling the mortgage away or something, that you're going to finish this program, and even if you have great grades, there's no real assistance with that unless you have a scholarship or something. It's entirely dependent upon capital, and that is the term capitalism. It is a system dependent upon those who already have financial capital, those who already have money in the bank, those who have found a way, or the previous generations have already assembled a great deal of resources, network, and connections in which you could just, any idea you come to mind, you can do. Any thought you have to mind, anything you want, you could buy. Versus, we were having this conversation earlier when I was cutting grass about we need to really re-educate young black men, because you're training young black men to work. You're training young black men to be employees, but you aren't training young black men to control the means of production, to control the means of labor, to produce labor for other black men. You're only teaching young black men to work. What I'm looking at are people who hate black people. They specifically hate black men. They don't care if you're intelligent. They don't care if you're nice. They just hate black people. They don't want to compete with black people. So legally, they can't stop you from getting a job because you're black, but they could stop you from getting the job without telling you why they're not hiring you. They could simply just not call back. You got black kids out here begging for jobs, dependent upon people that don't even see them as humans for work. And that is a form of child abuse, man. It's worse enough that we have to send our kids to institutions that don't educate them about black history or educate black people how to see themselves in a better light. The public education system is probably where most black people learn how to hate other black people, to be 100% honest with you. We're really dependent upon, it's not just a system, it's not just institutions, it's not just racist people, but we are dependent far too much upon there being this force that's coming to rescue us, this spiritual power that's going to come save us one day. And I think that spiritual power is your emotions. I think your emotions is that connection to divinity, that when you're angry, when you're mad, you're responding to shifts in the ether. You're responding to shifts within your inner being, and you need to listen to that. You know, if your body is telling you these labor conditions are subhuman, these employers that have you refuse to pay you a fair wage, you have to stop gaslighting yourself into thinking it's just you. It's just my imagination that everyone seems to be poor. It's just my imagination that everyone seems to be complaining, and they're working. I'm not talking about, like, they have jobs. They working. They're in here doing their thing. They're working full time as well. So what is the reason? What is the reason why we're in a system in which if you want to start a failed tech startup, they'll give you hundreds of thousands of dollars to start a failing tech business because you're a white guy in Silicon Valley, but direct alms to the poor, direct assistance to the poor, something that Ronald Reagan talked about, instead of having the social welfare programs, give this money directly to people every year. Give this money back. People are struggling in a way that, like, it's really hard to articulate. You got multiple families living together under one roof because they can't afford rent. They can't afford a house. And then once you get the house, it's a fucking scam. Houses are scams. You buy the house, now you're responsible for all the repairs. You're responsible for every little thing that breaks. So you go from only being liable for paying rent, and they gaslight you into thinking that that's a bad thing, and to now being the homeowner, and now you're responsible for 100%. Now you got to spend even more money. And we make that our goal, to spend as much money as possible, to buy the most expensive things, to live this life of, like, luxury where, like, people are literally starving, man. People literally are struggling. You know, and I'm not just talking about financially irresponsible people who spent their rent money on Chris Brown tickets or some shit like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm sure that exists. I'm sure there's thousands of people that do that. But you have hundreds of millions of people struggling right now. And the only means that you have to take this full circle, because I said this was going to be quick and it was not quick at all. To take this full circle, it's like the one means that you have is education. It is, I'm telling you firsthand, every single program to improve your life, every single program to make more money costs a shit ton of money. It costs way more money than you have. Like for you to even entertain improving your life, you would already have to be rich, is my point. If you had the ability to pay your rent already, You wouldn't have to consider getting a second degree, re-educating yourself. That's structural unemployment when you feel like you have job training and you can't seem to find any jobs. That's structural unemployment. That is a systemic problem. I don't care about the color of the person who's starving. I care about starving, homeless, struggling, suffering people, period. They don't have to look like me. They don't have to speak the same language. I don't understand this weird, satanic, Western mindset that people have, that it's virtuous to do well and watch others suffer. Because unless everyone else is doing well, unless the entire neighborhood is eating good, if you're doing well, you're in danger. And then they feed you that fear mongering. They tell you to fear the poor, fear immigrants, fear black people, fear people who have been struggling in this country since they got here. And then you take the few numbers of Chinese immigrants who came here from China. The people that come from China to America already have a shit ton of money. It costs a lot of money to send your kid overseas for education. It costs a lot of money to send your kids to another state for education. Can you imagine the expenses of sending your kids to another country for education? You're comparing some of the people that were already performing the best in their country in China, in India, to even have the opportunity to come to this country, to people who natively live in America the way that people natively live in China and still fucking suffer. The way people are still in India and fucking suffering. You're taking the presence of an Asian American community that is outperforming white people. Like that's something to brag about. You're outperforming a group of people that don't improve their life. They don't make themselves better. They just suppress and hold other people down. It wasn't, what Asian Americans prove is that if you don't have white people in your way, you're going to do a lot better than white people. If you have your own communities, you have your own businesses, you do business with one another, you focus on educating your kids and you prioritize education, even if the kids don't get a college degree or get a fucking doctorate or something, they still encourage your kids to be the best at whatever they do. So if the kid goes into fucking hip-hop dancing, they become the Jabberwockies. It's like the envy that we have for other groups of people as black people, and we call it racism. You're envious of their position. You're jealous of what they're in. Learn from these people, emulate their systems, and use them for yourself. If you need to spend 2 generations as a black American raising your kids like you're in a daimyo, like a Japanese daimyo, and you're the fucking emperor of Japan, that's what you got to do for 2 years. If you got to spend a decade raising your kids like it's Shabbat school every fucking Saturday, and like you're Jewish Americans, raise your kids as Jewish Americans. Stop focusing on the methods that do not work, is my point. Stop focusing on the processes that your body, your emotions, your psychology, everything in your system is telling you it does not work. Focus on the systems that do. Focus on the people that did make it. Because the majority of people that I'm seeing are struggling. The majority of people that I'm seeing aren't doing that well. Even if comparatively they're doing a little bit better than other people, if you really broke down their finances and you really spoke to them, they ain't doing that well. Even the people making up to $500,000 a year. Even people making $1 million a year. And I'm not saying that to make you, I'm saying that so you can sympathize. You can work with these people. You can network with these people. You can connect with these people. Because regardless of how much money they're making, they got expenses equal to how much money that they're making. The business owner has expenses too. You know, some of them are evil, some of them are bastards, but having a worker versus employer environment, society, that's not going to benefit anybody. Having the poor versus the rich, that's not going to benefit anybody. We need to be able to share our narrative with other people and talk about what's happening for connection and empathy and understanding, and then solutions. You know, if the billionaire is telling you, and I'm just giving you this as a the billionaire is telling you, I can't find good people to work long time, so I don't pay high wages, because why am I paying the most amount of money and I get nothing in return for that? That's not fair to me. You don't have to agree with him. You don't have to like that he said it. He doesn't have to be fucking right, but you need to listen, and we need to work from there. You don't need to jump. It's like everything is like an opportunity to jump on someone and correct them. And so, and you're trying to correct them on their personal, how they feel, what they've experienced, what they've gone through. You're jumping on them about their lived experience in reality, which is gaslighting and abusive. Can we correct one another? Absolutely, we need to. The time is not immediately after the words come after someone's mouth. As soon as the words come out of someone's mouth, you need to understand. Before you reply, before you react, before you respond, you need to understand. That's what empathy is understanding. And then you can respond. But if there was no understanding, we need to cut that shit out. You need to shut the fuck up. This college situation, the institutions themselves are wonderful. The means of entry into these institutions, the financing for these institutions, the cost of these institutions, when it is basically a mandatory experience to survive in America to have a college degree at this point. It is mandatory to have a college degree. At least our community colleges need to be publicly available and affordable and free. At least the community colleges. I can understand if there's tiers of education, and this is the greatest, even the basic universities are charging tens of thousands of dollars a year. And it just doesn't make any sense. It's completely nonsensical. For the programs that we do spend money on, for what the government is spending money on, to not ensure that your people are trained in at least trained in labor. If you're going to have a vulturistic capitalist system that is hell-bent on profit, I don't believe that that's true. I think you're just racist. I think you're just xenophobic. And I think things are so expensive so that Black people and Latino people and Asian people don't have access to them. That's how I really feel. Because if you were a psychopathic, narcissistic capitalist, you would ensure that every single American citizen is trained in labor to be as profitable to you as possible. If you are a racist, xenophobic asshole, you will suppress other people, including suffering yourself, just so you can say that you're better than other people. If the problem is capitalism, let's solve the problem of capitalism. I don't think the problem is capitalism within itself. I think the problem is racism. I think the problem is that housing is so expensive, education is so expensive, because they don't want Black people to be better than them. They don't want to see Black people doing better than them. They don't want to see immigrants doing better than them. They are willing to suffer, and they are willing to struggle, and they are willing to sacrifice millions of white children just so that non-white people suffered more. And I think that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. I think that's the reality of the situation. Maybe it is not necessarily capitalism within itself that is problematic. Maybe it is just racism.